Hello everyone, and welcome to game number 4 of the 2013 World Chess Championship match between Viswanathan Anand and Magnus Carlsen. You already seen 3 games, all of the 3 games were drawn, and game number 3 was especially a very nice fighting game, where Anand was on the attack, but could not, bring home a whole point. Here you will see a different type of game, as in game 2 you've seen Anand open with e4, and Carlsen tried to counter e4 with the Caro-Kann defense. But here Carlsen will use one of the specialties of his second Jon Ludwig hammer, and he will employ the Berlin defense. So it will be a very exciting game and a very exciting day, and it's interesting. Garry Kasparov also visited Chennai in Tamil Nadu on game 3 and 4, and there will also be an interview with Garry Kasparov along with the usual press conference after the game. I will put a link in the description below with both the press conference and also the interview with Garry Kasparov, so be sure to check that out. And as we do, I don't have a photo of this game, but I did take this screenshot from the official video. I will put a link to the official video also in the description below. The video lasts for some 5.5 hours. It covers the entire game with the official commentary, so if you have 5.5 hours to spare, there are worse ways to spend them. And also I prepared 2 very interesting photos for this video. Here is a photo that really shows how much support Carlsen is getting from his home country of Norway. So surely a gesture such as this one will lift the spirits of the 22-year-old challenger. And also a very interesting photo I found is a photo of the diet the players have been eating. So there you have it, what Carlsen's been eating throughout this match and what Anand has been eating throughout this match. And Anand's meal plan is pretty usual. I don't know, many of you may know this or may not know this. Anand is a vegetarian for a very long time, but it's interesting. Well, you can pause the video and read the entire thing. I will just read out the thing that interested me the most. So if you can see here, Magnus Carlsen, and go to dinner. Here it says at the end of dinner, usually pasta and 2 slices of pizza. Now, I'm pretty sure never in my life have I had pasta with 2 slices of pizza, but as Carlsen did win this World Chess Championship match, you should definitely consider having pasta and 2 slices of pizza for dinner if you have an important day tomorrow, as obviously Carlsen definitely knows what he's doing. So let's check out this very exciting game, and I'm pretty sure I forgot to turn down the sound. Okay, yeah, I did. There we have it. So let's check it out. Anand opens with e4, and here we have it, e5. So not going with c6 as in game 2 with the Caro-Kann defense. Knight to f3, knight c6, bishop to b5, the Ruy Lopez, and the immediate knight to f6. Carlsen now goes for the Berlin defense, as advised by his second Jon Ludwig hammer. We have castles, knight captures on e4, d4, knight to d6, bishop captures on c6, d captures on e5, knight to f5, and queen captures on d8. King captures, and this position has been played so many times, and it was analyzed thoroughly. So h3, bishop to d7, and now rook to d1. And here the usual idea is king to c8, and you'll most likely always see this move when faced with rook to d1. But here Carlsen goes for bishop to e7. This is known to be a specialty of his second Jon Ludwig hammer. We have knight to c3, and now that the knight is on c3, it's definitely time for the king to move away from the d file. So king to c8, now comes bishop to g5 and h6. Bishop captures, knight captures, and now rook to d2. a4 is also an idea here, but there is a known game that Carlsen's second Mr. Hammer played with the black pieces, and he achieved a very nice victory against this a4 move. So probably Anand knows this, as instead of this a4 move, he goes for rook to d2. We have c5, and now knight to e4 followed by b6, defending the c5 pawn, was also played plenty of times. But here Anand goes for a novelty. He plays rook a to d1, doubles up on the d file, attacks Carlsen's bishop on d7, and it's a very nice position, so far not seen in the Berlin defense. Bishop to e6, getting out of the way, knight to e1, Now comes knight to g6 and the knight to d3. Anand remaneuvers the knight from f3 to d3 and also now attacks the c5 pawn. b6 defending, and now knight to e2. As you will see in an interview after the game, if you check it out in the description below, Anand will characterize this move as, as sort of a mistake, because he allows bishop captures on a2, and he thought that this was impossible. But such as my title of the video suggests, it kind of reminds you of another World Chess Championship game, game 1 from the match Fischer versus Spassky in Reykjavik in 1972, where Spassky offered a poison pawn to Fischer, and Fischer grabbed it, and then Fischer lost the game. Here, on the other hand, it's a bit different. Here, Carlsen does play bishop captures on a2, and he allows the b3 to trap his bishop, but here is a difference that the bishop is actually not trapped. Here Carlsen plays c4, we have knight d to c1, now attacking the bishop, we have pawn captures, c captures on b3, and now bishop to b1. And now bishop has an escape path. So for some reason Anand missed this and he blundered a pawn. We have f4. Defending the e5 pawn. Rook to d7 doesn't really work because knight will not go for this immediately, rather rook to g8 will be played. And now rook to f7 will simply be met with knight captures on e5, and it will be a very nice position for black. So after bishop to b1, f4, defending the pawn, and the knight is guarding the f4 pawn. King to b7, preparing to bring the other rook into the game, and now knight to c3, attacking Carlsen's bishop on b1. Bishop to f5, and now g4. We have bishop to c8 and now knight to d3. And although Anand did lose a pawn there, Carlsen's pieces are still very inactive, and Anand is getting a lot of counterplay for the price of one pawn. Carlsen plays h5, we have f5 now, knight to e7, and now knight to b5. And here h captures on g4 is played, and this is one of the positions where Anand once again could have taken advantage of the position, like you've seen in the previous game, but here he doesn't. Here he immediately recaptures h captures on g4. A nicer idea was rook to c2, a nice in-between move that attacks c7, but it's it's easy to say, okay, rook c2, everyone can see this, but the problem is knight to c6, and then there's really nothing to do here. Except there is. In order to find this continuation, you have to find knight to b4 here. Now there's once again a double attack on the c6 knight, and if you move the knight, there's a double attack on the c7 pawn. This is the idea you have to see. You have to sacrifice the b4 knight. Knight captures on b4, and now rook captures on c7 with check. King to b8, and now rook captures on f7. And this is the idea. You sacrifice the pawn, a piece, but this rook on a8 is still completely out of the game. And you have a very strong two connected pass pawns. Okay, one pass pawn, but they are two connected pawns. And this pawn will be very dangerous when it starts marching forward. The problem with bishop captures on f5 is it doesn't work. Because you get knight to d6, now attacking this bishop, and also threatening checkmate on g7. So there is no way to give back the material to alleviate, your pain. Now there's a threat of checkmate here, and the only way to stop it is bishop to c8, and now you play e6, and it's going to be very hard to prevent e7 and e8. So this is one idea Anand missed in this game. He played the immediate h captures on g4, and now rook to h4 by Carlsen. Knight to f2, defending the g4 pawn, and now knight to c6. a6 was also possible, attacking the knight, but then you get knight to d6 check, temporarily sacrificing a knight. After captures, you get captures, attacking the e7 knight. After knight moves, then d7, and white will grab back material and will retain a very nice active position. So after knight to f2, knight to c6 by Carlsen, we have rook to c2, now pressuring that c7 pawn once again, a5, and now rook to c4. Here Anand stops Carlsen from further pushing this a4 pawn and doesn't allow him to activate his rook on a8. g6. A terrible mistake for black here would be to actually capture the f5 pawn. with the idea that, of course, if g captures, then rook captures on h4, because the rook here is unprotected. But now Anand would have rook captures on c6. Seems like a very nice idea. King captures, and now not immediately capturing the bishop, because then king would capture knight, rather knight to d4 check. King has to move, and now knight will pick up the rook, the pawn, the bishop, and then you have two knights for a rook, and white will definitely have compensation here. So after rook to c4, g6 by Carlsen, we have rook to c1, and now bishop to d7, defending the knight on c6. We have e6, trying to move the bishop away from the defense of the knight on c6, pawn captures, and the bishop has to go to e8 now. Knight to e4, a very nice idea by Anand that sacrifices the g4 pawn with a check, but the knight will be very strong. We have rook to g4 check, king f2, and now rook to f4 check. King to e3, and now rook goes back to f8. Knight to d4, now there's a triple attack on the c6 knight. We have knight captures, only move, and now rook captures on c7 with check. So grabbing back the pawn. King to a6, and now king captures on d4. We have rook to d8 with check, king to c3, king to e5 seems like a much more active square for the king to support your past e6 pawn, but you know, there's the active king and there is the too active king, because king e5 runs into rook to f5 checkmate, and this would be a terrible way, you know, to end a World Chess Championship match game. So after rook d8 check, king to c3. Now comes rook to f3 check, king b2, and now rook to e3, attacking the knight. We have rook to c8, forcing a trade, rook to d3. Carlsen is still trying to play this position. We have rook to a8 check, king to b7, a very nice idea, not immediately allowing rook captures bishop, but first forcing the king back, because you don't want to allow black to start pushing those pawns to be protected by the king. So first rook to a8 check, king moves, and only now capturing Carlsen's bishop. We have rook captures knight. There are no tricks with rook captures on b3, because the king escapes via rook to c2. Of course, the king will not go to a2. So rook captures knight. We have e7, and now rook to g3. We have rook to c3, offering a trade of rooks, rook to e2 check, rook to c2 blocking, and now rook to e3 once again, threatening to capture on b3. King a2, we have b4, g5, rook to d2, and now rook to e5. Rook to d7, this comes with check, king to c6, attacking the rook, and now rook defense. The threat is now, of course, e8, promoting the pawn to a queen. Doubling up rooks on the e-file, not allowing pawn to e8. We have rook to d6 check, king moves, and now other rook checks on d7. King to a6, and now rook to d5. We have rook to e2, this comes with check, king to e3, and now rook to e6. And here rook to d8 is played. Of course, rook captures on g5 is not possible. If you capture the g5 pawn, rook captures on g5, then you get b5, and there is no defense against b4. Whatever move black plays, white plays, doesn't really matter. b4 is coming, and then rook to a2 will be checkmate. So after rook to e6, rook to d8, we have g4 now, rook to g5, here comes rook captures on e7, we have rook a8 check, king moves, and now rook back to g8. a4, rook captures on g4, we have pawn captures on b3, and Carlsen does have two extra pawns, but they are two doubled pawns, and black's and Carlsen's king is very inactive here. So rook 8 to g7, king to a6, rook captures, and here comes king captures on b3. And here the game ended as the players agreed to a draw. Carlsen does have an extra pawn, but there is no way to actually do anything here. There is no way to make progress with the king or pawn after you give a check, simply king b4, and there is no progress to be made here. If you start pushing, then white will push the king back. So of course this is a drawn endgame, and both of the players know this. So yeah, this is game number 4 of the World Chess Championship match, Anand versus Carlsen in 2013. I do hope you enjoyed it, and like I said, check out the links in the description below if you want to learn some more, you know, further increase your vast knowledge about this match. Check out the official press conference and a nice interview with Garry Kasparov about, things in general about chess, and how things are finally back to the way they should be. You know, there are no knockouts in the World Chess Championship series. You know, they returned to the match format, and it's very interesting. I really do suggest you check it out. So yeah, that's the game. I do hope you enjoyed it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you soon with a very interesting Game 5 of the 2013 World Chess Championship match between Viswanathan Anand and Magnus Carlsen. Thank you all, and I'll see you soon.